take
Mhm.
inspiration from things that you see in life online, put your own spin on it. That's part of creating and part of artistry. And, what we do is a form of art. And to be able to then edit it in a way that is your own, or put your own spin on it in some sort of way, I think is the beauty of this digital world that we live in.
Welcome to Unplugged, the tech podcast for digital entrepreneurs. I am one of your hosts, Brooke, the founder of the Sober Biz Collective.
Hey, podcasters. My name's Nate Kelly, best-selling author and founder of Podcast Revolution Studios. If you're looking for tech, tools, and tips on how to utilize podcasting for your business, you're in the right spot. Let's get unplugged.
Well, hello, top charting tech podcast host.
What?
How's your week been?
It's been a whirlwind. I got a message from someone that had listened to our podcast, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you did such a good job with this." And I'm like, "This is the first time I've actually not edited the show." We can
Yeah,
for that.
and I want to talk about that too from your perspective, because there is that sort of control piece where you can formulate the episodes, which we've each sort of done always with our own shows. But from your
Yeah.
perspective of just kind of hearing the final product, what's your perspective on that?
I feel like kind of a giddy schoolgirl every time something comes out that I didn't have to have my hands in, and it's like
Yeah.
hearing it for the first time, even though it was there and we did the interview and everything. So I've really been enjoying this. It's also been a learning process for me, and how to just release control and this
Mm,
trust that other people can take on these tasks.
yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
really, really, really hard thing as a business owner, especially with podcasting, because you're putting out a message, right? And,
Mm.
not having control over your message can be really scary. Yeah, I've loved listening to it and seeing how you have really used editing to kind of create a narrative for each episode, because we can get off topic so easily and we go on rambles all the time about stuff. So I think paring it down and really getting the meat and potatoes and what's important and what's going to add value and what adds to this story is the biggest piece of editing.
Yes, from my side of things, it is having that control over the final episode, which I'm not technically a control freak. I love the collaboration side of things and getting input, which I think we've had a relatively good back and forth with input after the fact.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've just always loved post production. I mean, it is kind of the labor intensive side of things too, but for some reason, I really just love a hot cup of coffee and your editing platform of choice, and just kind of sitting there and being able to mold and bring together a conversation that, end up being surprised by the final
Yeah.
outcome. And I think the way that we batch record episodes as well, sometimes it's just a really long conversation. With episodes 1 and 2, it technically was one recording session and one long
Mhm.
conversation about our journeys and our goals for this show. And to be able to create 2 episodes out of that and take things that make sense and kind of group those segments together, it is my favorite. And I think a good tip for beginners, I think batch recording is going to be your best
Mhm.
friend. Definitely recommended. You can segment parts of the conversation, but I think to sit down 1 or 2 days during a month and batch record is a huge time saver, and definitely recommended on my end.
Yeah, it's honestly the only way I think as digital entrepreneurs to really make a podcast work is to set a day of the week that you are just going to record a bunch of episodes. I mean, podcasting on its own can be a full-time job. People
Yes,
I have
it's
a
so true.
podcast cat. She is every time I
Here
am
she
recording
is.
anything. She
She could be our mascot.
well, you would have to kick Watts to the curb, and, Watts is
No, no, no. We have Watts. Big up to you, my friend, the listener. We had our official launch this week, and we are on charts and Apple Podcast charts, Spotify new releases, and that's all because of you. So thank you so much. And
Yeah.
the reason I brought this up was, well, you mentioned Watts, and we're going to get into some listener feedback, some listener Q&A, and I think it would be fun if we called it Ask Watts
Oh, I love it. I love
as
that
like
so
the
much.
segment. Yeah.
Yeah, Watts is our little mascot that you see on the cover
Yes.
of the Unplugged podcast.
Brooke, what's the evolution of your editing software been like? Any free recommendations? What do you use for your shows? Let's kind of talk the technical side for a minute.
Well, my first, experience with editing was on Windows Movie Maker.
Ah, yes, Windows Movie
Probably
Maker.
2001. That's really where I learned and self-taught how to, just piece together things and pseudo edit. Like, I had absolutely no formal training, but I had 3 little brothers and a digital camera and would just
And a passion for tech. That's all you needed.
that's all I need, that's all you need.
Yeah.
Um And, we actually created some really cool stuff just with that free software, and I am a sucker for saving money. I will find the best free resources I possibly can to get the job done. Sometimes that means it takes me longer, but, often I just feel like there's just too many subscriptions, especially as a business owner. Like, you're paying for your website host,
Oh,
you're paying for your email list stuff, you're paying for, like,
so
every
true.
every app, to help organize your business. So, however I can cut down on those costs, the better. So, for me, I went to school for digital, documentary filmmaking, and so I learned how to edit on the Adobe suite on Adobe Premiere Pro. So, because I do photography, I do video, I do podcasting, I do graphic design work. The Adobe suite is a really good investment for me because it incorporates all of that technology at once. It is
Nice.
very pricey. In Canada, it's about $79 a month, and
Ooh, okay.
that's a big subscription. So I'm gonna
Yes.
give you an insider tip for those of you
Uh-oh.
that, wanna save yourself some money. They give you, like, a one-year deal where they'll give you 50% off, so it ends up being, like, $40 a month instead of $80 a month, and when that deal is up, if you say, "I can't afford this and I'm gonna cancel," they will give you another deal.
You heard it here first. Okay.
That's right. So you just keep clicking, "No, I can't afford it, I wanna cancel," until they give you another 50% off, and I have been doing this now for 3 years, so
I love it. God, that is a great
but yeah,
tip.
Adobe has been amazing. Audition is their audio editing software, which when I was doing the Seek Purpose podcast, we used, Adobe Audition. I use Premiere Pro still for bigger editing jobs when it comes to video, but I've actually loved CapCut, like the free version of CapCut. They just made it super user friendly and they have really cool AI technology and different things that you can't get in Premiere Pro yet. So yeah, for video, especially when I'm on my phone and I want to create something quick for Instagram, like something to promote an episode of a show or whatever it is, I will use CapCut now. And I find it's a way more user friendly entry level editing software for someone who hasn't gone to school for editing and doesn't know, exactly what they're doing. They make it really easy and foolproof. So that's a
Yeah.
great resource.
So true. Yeah, I was initially introduced to CapCut through TikTok because you see
Yeah.
these, use this template and it'll take you to the app. But you actually recommended when we started Unplugged the desktop version of CapCut, which I've been playing around with as well. And, you mentioned the AI tools or capabilities and, the auto generated captions, podcast clips, or other content on social platforms, and if it's sort of an interview or like a talking head video, they all have captions, and CapCut does a really great job of auto generating those captions. There are tons of text options and colors and fonts, so that's been the biggest time saver and sort of ease of editing that I've found with CapCut. And yes, so user friendly. I mean, you're clicking the scissor icon to cut I mean, it's very entry level, yet sort of, you can graduate, as you learn
Mhm.
things, or even if you're an expert editor, I mean, you can get the job done through CapCut. I also love it like creates libraries for you of your past projects, and you can create templates for your work if you have specific, branding or colors or whatnot. So I like the sort of library feature that they have too, which is really cool.
I think the one downside with CapCut is so many people are using it that you're gonna run the risk of having the
Yes.
same kind of, easy templated fonts and, like, end screens and that kinda stuff. Um, so if you can avoid that and, like, create your end screens in Canva or something so they're very
Yeah.
branded to you and you're not just using their kind of plug and play stamp things in CapCut. What do you find? Because I use the free version. I am a little frugal.
I did only a free trial. Yeah.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I
Okay. What did you find the difference was? Like, do you think it's worth the investment to pay
I
for that
I
subscription or
don't really.
okay.
It's there the added features for the pro version are, I mean, they're nice, but I don't think they're necessary to get a quality product. So if
Right.
you are looking to eliminate a subscription, to Brooke's point, or get the most out of a platform that's paid versus free, I don't think that CapCut is one that it's necessary to subscribe to. You're getting
Mhm.
the features that you need with the free version
Yeah, they've really packed the free version.
for
I
sure.
think there's a couple of tools I've noticed, like, the AI face tracking where
Yes.
when someone's talking, it'll kind of follow their face. I think that might be helpful for social media, especially because when you're editing things in CapCut for your podcast, if you're doing wide shot like me and Nate are now, or you have a live show and there's like a two shot and you're two people talking, like having the face tracking could be very helpful to eliminate having to cut back and forth from each person talking and that
That might
kind of
be
stuff.
helpful for Nice Girls Club if you guys are doing a
Yeah.
group shot.
Yeah, because that is the Nice Girls Club podcast. We are an in-person interview style show, and we had like 3 people in the last episode that I just edited, and it was like the amount of cutting that has to happen.
I can't imagine. That's the only thing I was thinking about when I was watching your video is, God, Brooke, this editing process was probably a nightmare.
It is, um I mean, okay, so for editing, I loathe it until I'm doing it, and then I
Yeah.
can't stop, and I could do it for hours, and then I don't know if it's an ADHD thing or what, but I'll get so into it that it will I can sit there for hours and do it, but just, like, opening my computer and getting started is, like, the hard part, and, I am teaching one of the girls how to edit right now, so I can take that off my plate, but,
Cool.
yeah, I love seeing things on TikTok and on Instagram of what other people are doing for their shows and then trying to recreate it, like, I get so much joy out of it, and
Yes.
I really love those in-person style shows where they're, like, back and forth, and the person that's talking is really front and center, and I'm like, "Oh, let me see if I can do this with our show," and
That's where I get the majority of my inspiration, because it's like, that looks so cool. And shit, I can do that. Utilize your resources. Take inspiration from things that you see online. Actually, this is a perfect opportunity. So I got this book, Steal Like an Artist.
Oh, yes.
Have you heard? Um,
I've heard of it, yeah.
yeah, Austin, he does like these really cool, like, content, audio, video, artistry, author inspired, and it's so cool, just like scribble text and really cool content that he puts out. But Steal Like an Artist is sort of this idea that nobody's original, and as long as you're not blatantly ripping people off, take
Mhm,
inspiration from things that you see in life online, and put your own spin on it. That's part of creating and part of artistry. And, what we do is a form of art. And to be able to then take inspiration from things that you see or that you love, and um, edit it in a way that is your own, or, put your own spin on it in some sort of way, I think is the beauty of now this digital world that we live in and having so much content available. I think it's flattery, if somebody else's work inspires you to want to create your own version of it. I would be flattered.
You know what? That's a really great topic to talk about because it's actually come up recently. I had somebody reach out asking about copyrights of photos and things like that. I mean, copying someone else's work is still illegal. You can't take their videos
They'll
without
they'll
permission. You can't
steal
take
it.
their
Right, right.
Yeah, you can't take their photos without permission, but there is something called fair use. And so what that is if you're using their content to have a reaction to it, to add commentary to it, to change it in some way, to parody it in some way, to create educational content with it. Like that's fair use, and you're absolutely allowed to use other people's content and don't necessarily need permission. It's always good practice to credit a creator if you're inspired by them. It
Yeah.
also helps you build relationships with people. When you're tagging them in your videos, they might see it, they might share it even. And it's just, I once put out a video. I heard this thing on a podcast that really spoke to me, and then I made a TikTok about it, and I was like, "Yeah, like, I'm gonna adopt this theory, this message." It was like, "If someone is pissed off at me, it's none of my business, and if they wanna tell me, they can phone me, and if they can't phone me because they don't have my number, then they don't know me well enough to be pissed off at me," or something like that, right? So I had said something similar to that a while ago, and I just kinda added to it with that quote, but I didn't mention that I heard it on a podcast, and then somebody else said the same thing because they obviously listened to the same podcast, and then somebody commented under that person's thing and is like, "Did you steal this from Brooke?" And I'm like,
Oh
"No,
gosh.
I heard it
Yeah.
on a podcast." Like, just be really authentic about it, like, I was listening to this podcast today, it was called whatever, and they said this, and I'm gonna adopt that, like, that's so it just saves your butt a little bit because that stuff can get nasty online.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking
Can get
for a reason to be
messy.
mad at you, so
It's so true. Yeah, don't give them a reason to think that you're sneaking around or trying to get away with something. Credit their work.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they'll be flattered if it's done in a way from um, I think we put things out in the world for people to
Mhm.
react to and for people to resonate with and be inspired by. Isn't that the point of all of this? I mean, we're
Yeah.
trying to inspire people and build communities and um, put out useful information, that may help people in some way. So just make sure you're stealing like an artist.
Yeah,
and
definitely great book
uh,
recommendation too.
yeah, it'll be in the show notes today for sure. I just made a note. So thank you, Austin.
So what did you find? I think one of the hardest things about editing for me is taking things out. Like, there's so much good juicy stuff, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily add to the story, or I'm trying for the Nice Girls Club, like, trying to get it down to 45 minutes, and we've talked for an hour and 20. And,
Yeah,
like, what do you how do you decide what to take out? Like, what's your process for that?
it's a great question. The first thing I do is take the raw file, your raw footage, whether it's audio or video, and I make sure that I clip out all the bullshit in the beginning, the highs, the how are yous, the okay, let's get started. And I clip it right at the go point. And then I go to the end of the raw footage and I make sure that I end it right where we say, see you next time, or, thanks for today. And I clip out all that extra garbage at the end. So I know that I'm working with just the start point and the end point, and I look at the time and see what I'm working with. So typically your show format or uh, whatever project you're working on will have a time limit or a time goal. Like Brooke and I like to be around the 28 to 30 minute mark. So keeping that in mind, then I look at the raw footage. Okay, I'm working with 37 minutes. So I know I roughly have to get rid of 10 minutes. So then as I'm editing through the usable content, I'm keeping that in mind. I'm looking for any awkward pauses. I'm looking for any repetition or kind of tangents that don't add to the episode or add any decent information. I'm looking for any like breaking of the fourth wall For instance, I have already cut out of this episode Brooke and I talking about audio feedback and our personal lives, anything that sort of doesn't add to the episode, offensive things, curse words that, may affect the episode. And then I do a rough draft. So that's like my initial pass. And then I'll watch back that rough draft and see how I can shorten it more. I don't like more than about 4 seconds of any silence. So, if I'm trying to recall a book and I can't remember it, or if, the word that I'm thinking of isn't coming to mind and there's any silence, it's more 3 or 4 seconds, I'll usually cut that out as well. And then kind of just clip and snip as I go through the episode to make it to my end goal. Sort of reverse
Mm.
engineering of the episode.
Yeah, I love that point you made about like long pauses and silences and stuff like that. I find a really, really good way while you're actually recording, if something does mess up and you know you want to edit it out, give yourself a long pause and
Yes.
a long silence after that mess up. Because when you're editing, you're going to see a dip in the audio and it's going to be really, really clear where that space was. And then also it helps you with editing because you're not going to be talking over yourself trying to like find the perfect cut and make the audio match up and stuff. So give yourself a pause, repeat what you meant to say, and then move forward. And it'll show up when you're editing. It makes it really easy to find those spaces. I am a lazy. I want to find the easiest, fastest way to do absolutely anything. And I used to spend a ton of time editing, but I've had to find ways to be way more efficient with it. And one of those ways is like during recording. I just swallowed a cat hair.
See, there we go. That'll be an edit. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll leave it in just for fun.
While you're recording a podcast, your conversation could go on for an hour, and to sit there and listen to an episode for an hour that you've already recorded, you've already listened to, and then you're getting,
Right.
it can be really mundane and can be overwhelming. So whatever you can do to make that process easier for you while you're recording is so important. The other thing I used to do with editing is instead of creating these episodes and then going back and editing them later, we made a live podcast. So if
Yeah.
you're not someone who loves editing, this is a really great option for you, or you're not really sure how to do it, or you don't have the time to do it, is having live shows. So what we did is we would go live on Facebook every once a week. I think it was every Friday or every Monday. And we would live record the show. And then basically all I would have to do after is trim off the
Mm.
beginning, trim off the end, make sure it ends really nicely, and then add our intros and outros to each episode. And that made it super doable and allowed me to create a lot of consistency. Because honestly, while you're growing your show and your audience, consistency is way more important than just the editing. And if you're doing a live show, people are going to expect there's going to be some mess ups and you guys are going to talk over each other. Something's going to happen. Like there's less pressure on you to create a high production show.
And I think it adds to that sort of casual, conversational, more natural flow to the conversation, which I think really you should keep that in mind if you are editing or if it's a heavily produced show. You don't want to edit it down so much that the conversation doesn't even sound natural or free flowing. That's listeners will be able to tell and potentially be turned off by that if it's sounding too robotic or
Mm-hmm.
unnatural. So keep that in mind too when you're editing or fixing those pauses or breaks in conversation. That's why I kind of mentioned the 3 to 4 seconds, because you do want pauses. I mean, in natural conversation, even the best public speakers in the world have pauses and breaks in natural conversation. So keep that in mind too. Also about things to keep in mind while you're recording too. You want to be in command of the conversation and keep in mind that end goal or that time goal for your episode or for batch recording. Kind of keep your time frame in mind so that you don't have so much editing work to do and
Mm-hmm.
so that you're not trying to chop up so much stuff into 30 minutes. Keep that in mind too. I usually try to go like 10 to 15% over. So if you want a 30-minute episode, you probably want about 40, 42 minutes of raw footage max. Otherwise, you're creating more work for yourself than I think is necessary. Keep it succinct to the point, but you definitely want some additional room to be able to play with.
Yeah, and also down the road, if you end up, like, creating a Patreon account, which is somewhere where people can subscribe and pay you money for the content that you're creating, or you can now do that through Spotify and Apple, they have subscription options as well, but with Patreon, you can really create, like, a paywall for some content, and that's a really good place to add those things that you cut out of an episode, like, "Oh, we talked about this, but it didn't make the cut, but this is some, like, bonus material for your audience,"
Yeah.
right? So you're not doing more work for yourself, you just kinda save these clips for later and give that to, like, a VIP group if you're growing that, like a Facebook group or something, or you can use things like Patreon or other paywalls.
Yeah, I love bonus content or like behind the scenes stuff. Love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and actually with the Nice Girls Club, I've been putting some of the things that don't make it into the podcast, I use it for social media, so they kinda see some funny clips of things that we cut out and
Love it. That's like the perfect show for that kind of content and that people would want to see more of. Let's talk about, from an editing standpoint, you mentioned with the grant, perhaps being able to buy some additional equipment and, having additional cameras. So, from an editing point of view, how would that work with editing? Do you pull in each file from the camera and kind of splice them together? Like, what would that look like in the future?
if you know what you're doing, it makes it a lot easier to have everything separated so that you just basically can collect all of your content, and then thank God for AI syncing.
Oh
Both
my
Premiere
God.
Pro and
Yes.
CapCut now have that option. So it'll auto sync your video. It doesn't do a great job yet. I
Yeah,
I still have to
it's
go.
typically like a half a second. You may have to play with it,
Yeah,
but it'll get
yeah.
you in the range.
Exactly, it saves a ton of time. So I layer all my videos first and just put all the content in there and sync all the audio and all the videos together so that everybody's audio, everybody's video is all one, right? And so while you're editing, this is going to be a little bit more advanced. You don't need to do this at first, especially if it's just you talking on a Zoom or something. You'll only have like one video file. But the layers are basically whatever's on the top layer is what your audience is going to see, what's going to show up in the video. And then you go down and down and down in layers. So what I do is my two shot or my wide shot is my base layer. And then I put each speaker in layers on top of that and sync everybody's audio. And then you basically just go through and cut out the people, like when someone's talking, you want to make sure you've cut out the top layer so that the second layer is talking and then vice versa with the third, whatever. It's hard to explain. This would be way better as like a visual masterclass.
Yeah, you're right.
But the layers are gonna be your best friend,
Yeah,
and with that kind of show, I'd probably use Premiere Pro. You can use CapCut for sure, but you wanna make sure you turn off the option where it just snaps to grid, because 'cause I've done this a couple of times now where I haven't turned off the snap to grid option on CapCut, and then I'll do some editing, and I'll take out a chunk, and then it snaps the main file to where to the, like, the next file, right? But then it unsyncs with the rest of the videos over above it because they're not grouped together. So it's a harder thing to explain. Maybe we'll do like a group training
yeah, I'd love
for
to.
the audience if people want to like just comment on this episode or on something on social media or join our Facebook group and it's something that you'd like is like an editing masterclass. Like I think that would be a really cool thing to
Yeah.
visually show you on like what that process looks like.
I know for me, that was one of kind of the biggest barriers of getting started was this idea that, well, shit, I don't know how to put all that together and make an episode out of it. I know I can talk and I know I have
Mhm.
stories to tell and information to get out there, but how the hell you make it into an episode, right? So I think that could be super cool with our community.
There is one, so there's AI tools now as well that help you edit using your transcripts, and there's a platform called Descript, I think it's called?
Yes.
Descript, yeah, okay. So yeah, they will edit for the transcripts, you can take out all the ums, like, it's a really quick way to edit your videos if you don't wanna get into all the, like, having all that control over it. I do find it looks choppy. I see a lot of people that use Descript, and I think CapCut as well has implemented this feature as well. It looks choppy, and sometimes the ums and ahs and those kind of things, like, they're worth it just to leave in rather than, like, cut it out and then have this weird jump cut video,
Right.
right? So for video podcasting, not as practical as for audio podcasting, but it's definitely an option for those who don't wanna learn editing.
And just, one last thing on that to kind of wrap it up would be, you always, if you're using AI tools or anything that's computer generated, you always need to sign off on the final product. So you need to watch through the video, tweak any things that they have done. It's a computer, it's not going to be perfect. So, always do a final run through, a final listen, and make any additional adjustments to make sure that it's kind of that finalized product and something that you're proud to put out into the world and that, is representative of the message that you're trying to tell.
I think that was a great way to wrap it up, Nate.
So too. Hey, some may say I'm a professional.
You've done this before, haven't you?
Thanks so much for hanging out today. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube for all of our video content at Unplugged Tech Pod.
And join us in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/unplugged podcast. Also, make sure to throw us a 5-star review if you are finding this content valuable for you and your digital business. We accept all forms of reviews, Apple Podcast, Spotify follows, YouTube, telling your grandmother about us.
And make sure to share the episode with one person in your life who may find it valuable. And we'll see you next time on Unplugged.
I think it's good enough, and we're just going to keep getting better.